So it's my pleasure to introduce Bryn Shayevitz, PhD, who is our special guest speaker today. He's going to be talking about decoding the race performances of Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson. Bryn is not only a member of VBS, but she's a writer, scholar, educator, and dancer. She got her PhD from UCLA in culture and performance and is currently lecturer in dance at Chapman University in Orange County. She's the author of Behind the Scene, Tap Dance, Race, and Invisibility During Hollywood's Golden Age, which explores the history of blackface and more covert forms of racial masquerade in film and animation in the 1930s and 40s. And did you bring some of your books today? So she actually did bring some of her books today if you're interested in them, and she can sign it if you want. I don't know where that's set up. Is it set up? Oh, they're going to get it. In addition, she is the creator of the Rhythm Project, a series of documentaries that take up the questions regarding the relationship between rhythm, dance, and diaspora as it exists for contemporary tap dances in LA and New York City. And with that, Bryn, thank you for joining us. We look forward to the talk. We're going to have questions at the end, so keep your questions. And I'll point out then we have microphones we're going to either be coming around with, or you can walk up to the mic and ask questions. So Bryn, take it over.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Hazak, for having me. And thank you all for joining me in the middle of your hot Monday here. So I'm going to be showing a lot of film clips. So it's going to be some of me talking, but really just a lot of Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson. How many of you are familiar with the films of Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson? Just show me. Good. All of you. Okay. How many of you find him really funny? Eddie Cantor, at least. Anybody find him really funny? Some of you. Well, that's the problem if none of you find him very funny. Okay. We'll just have to see how this goes. So without further ado, I'm just going to start with a clip from Roman Scandals. Has anybody seen Roman Scandals? Okay, good. All right, so we'll start fresh. A kind-hearted young man is thrown out of his corrupt hometown of West Rome, Oklahoma, aka the San Fernando Valley, which is where this was filmed. He falls asleep and dreams that he is back in the days of olden Rome, where he gets mixed up with the court intrigue and a murder plot against the emperor.
Hello, fellas. Where's the circus?
Down this road and straight ahead.
Oh, I thought for a minute. What circus is it?
The Circus Maximus, of course.
Maximus. Not Ringling Brothers?
Are you bound for Rome?
No, I was just thrown out. I just left there.
Have they heard of our glorious victory over the Britons? They lost their shirts.
Yeah, but they got your pants. Look, why don't you boys run back into the dressing room and put them on, huh?
Is it thus you greet the soldiers of the Emperor Valerius? Methinks thou art a spy.
Methinks thou art nuts.
Nuts?
Yes, I'm giving you the raspberry.
Nuts? Raspberry? Perhaps he's a food vendor.
Well, I used to help out at Keep's Grocery, but when Cooper saw me with Agrippa...
The Empress Agrippa? You know her?
Do I know her? Where do you think I sleep nights?
What? He insults her Imperial Majesty. And by the gods, he shall die.
Say, this guy is all right. He can act. Hey, look out with that thing. You know you almost cut me then?
Hurry! Cut him down like Roman. Steel in his hand. Steel in his heart.
Listen, you. Keep on playing with those knives, and the first thing you know, you'll hurt somebody. Look at the point of that thing. Look at it. How would you like to have me poking at you like that? Huh? Here. You play with him, and we'll watch.
The coward will not fight. Boil him in oil. Cut his head out.
Let him go.
Hold your tongue.
Well, it seems kind of silly, but you want me to do it, I'll do it.
Time to that stake. He will make a worthy target for our arrows. A goodly plan.
Yeah, what's so good about it? Wait a minute, you can't be around like this. What do you think you're doing? Wait a minute. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Big boys like you playing Indian. If you guys are trying to scare me,
Yes?
you're doing fine. Oh. Don't worry, Whiskers. I can fix it for you. I've got some string here in my pocket. My pockets are gone. My pants are gone. Good heavens. Help. You mean this is no fooling? I'm really living in Rome?
Yes, but not for long.
But wait a minute. If this is really Rome, you can't kill me.
Oh, no?
No, because I haven't been born yet. It wouldn't only be murder. It would be birth control. Say, wait a minute. What? Help! Help! Help!
Oh, wow, what manner of game is this?
It ain't post office, friend of the people.
This fellow's a spy. He's a traitor.
It's your turn now.
This dog maligned the Empress Agrippa.
Oh, I did not. All I said was I used to sleep beside her at the museum.
Enough! This is blasphemy. That's too good for him. Take him to the slave market.
I'd be much more useful around the fish market. I used to work for Keith.
Silence! You'll be sold to the highest bidder. Perhaps I'll buy you myself, if only to let you feel my whip.
Save you money. I can feel it here.
At the slave market. Oh, what am I bid for this sturdy little captive? What am I bid?
Lady, please don't touch unless you're going to buy. And don't buy.
Isn't anybody going to bid? What, nobody?
Well, if nobody wants me, I might as well go home.
Slaves who are not sold are thrown to the lion.
To the light. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's have a bid, son.
Come, citizens. What am I offered for this slave? Will somebody say 5 diners? Do I hear 5 diners?
I don't even hear 4 diners. What's the matter with you people? Don't you know a bargain when you see one?
Will somebody make a bid?
Look at me. I can cook a little. I can take care of the children. If there are no children, I can take care of that by being a son to you.
Doesn't anybody want him?
Doesn't anybody want me?
It looks like you're going to the lion.
Oh, come, people. You may never get a chance like this again. I can sing. All of me. Why not take all of me?
What about a bid?
Look, I can dance. Yum, dum, 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 dum.
To the lions. 100 pips. 100 pips.
Phew. Oh, mister, you'll never be sorry for this. Tell me, how much is 100 piffix?
1/10 of $1 gold dollar.
Why, that's 10 cents. What do you think this is, Woolworth?
Silence! 100 piffix has been bid. Do I hear more?
1 gold diner. Say, 1 gold diner. That's more like it.
The diner is bid by Josephus.
Who? Oh, please, mister, don't sell me to him. He wants to whip me. He told me so.
1 diner is bid. 1 diner is bid.
Why don't you sell me to the man with the piffix? After all, he spoke first. Piffix are not bad.
1 diner is bid. Do I hear 2?
Look, people. Look what you can get for 2 diners. Look at these skins, imported. All the way from Russia.
1 diner is bid. 1 diner, 1 diner, 1 diner, 1 diner.
If I throw in 2 pair of pants, will you take me?
Going to Josephus for 1 diner. Going.
2 diners.
2 diners. Who bid that?
Somebody over there.
2 diners is bid. 3 diners. 3 diners is bid. 4 diners. 4 diners. Who bid that 4 diners?
Same fella.
4 diners is bid. 5 diners. 5 diners. Now let me hear another diner.
Diner. Is there anyone finer?
Silence.
Oh.
What do I hear?
You just heard me saying diner.
Going to Josephus for 5 diners. Going.
Wrap me up.
Who bid that?
I did.
6 diners is bid.
But lady, you're just throwing your money away. I'm weak. I can't do any work.
I'm not buying you for work.
That's just what I was afraid of.
6 diners bid. Do I hear 7?
Listen, buddy, why don't you bid 7 diners? Why, the gold in my teeth is worth more than that, see?
7 diners. 7 diners is bid.
8 diners.
8 diners is bid. 8 diners is bid. 8 diners bid. Do I hear 9? No more bid? All right. Going to the lady for 8 diners. Going. Going.
What about you? Or you?
Going.
Mr. Josephus, please, buy me. You can even whip me on my day off.
10 diners. 10 diners. Going for 10 diners. Going. Going. Going.
Gone.
Eddie Cantor is funny to some. He can be really funny if you appreciate fast quips, wordplay, cultural references, and a comedian who can use his physical size, or lack thereof, to invert normative gender paradigms. In fact, a lot of Cantor's shtick involves challenging history, inviting levity to exaggerate and highlight the absurdity of certain social dynamics. In this scene from Roman Scandals, Eddie Cantor as Oedipus, pronounced Oedipus, finds himself on the auction block in ancient Rome for reasons beyond his own comprehension. While buried in all kinds of humor, Cantor, in due course, draws attention to the ways in which trying to place a dollar amount on the human body is ludicrous. So preposterous that we may as well be talking about belly buttons. Moreover, he underlines the intrigue sparked by the exotic body. He only starts receiving bids when he emphasizes how his skins have been imported all the way from Russia. On the outside, Cantor appears to destabilize everything from the institution of slavery to roles which have historically been assigned to women. His comic material, which is less overt, complicates Cantor's humor and perhaps undermines that which he sought to expose. Cantor's performance is also double-coded, a term Henry Byle uses to describe performances which can, quote, communicate one message to Jewish audiences while simultaneously communicating another, often contradictory message to Gentile audiences, end quote. Just as Cantor might read funny to some and not to others, he will likely read Jewish to some and not Jewish to others. This is because Cantor worked hard to de-emphasize his Jewishness, even if at times he said things that an audience equipped to see and hear as Jewish will read as so. Cantor offers a series of visual and oral signs which are open to double meaning, depending on the audience. During the slave auction, some viewers will understand its allusion to a tension between the Jews and the Romans, which spanned 2,000 years. Others, not schooled in Jewish history, might instead pick up on Cantor's mention of Woolworth's, a famous five-and-dime store that scholars like Byle and comedians like Lenny Bruce would surely label goyish. As Cantor's performance demonstrates, being Jewish on the screen is not about being so much as it is about performing, and the actor frequently double-coded his performances as a means of fitting in as white rather than standing out as Jewish. Sometimes fitting in as white meant masquerading as Henry Ford, the notorious anti-Semite.
Hello. Oh, look, it's the new Zeppelin. Say, I'm nervous and we're very hungry. We'd like to have something to eat.
Oh, you would?
Yes. Personally, I'd like some hot water and prunes, bananas and cream, cornflakes, and boiled eggs 2 minutes. If they're 2.5 minutes, I can't eat it because the acidity presses against my heart, and I've got to take 6 Bel Airs in hot water.
Say, who are you? What's your name?
Henry?
Henry what?
Ford?
Well, Mr. Ford, I've heard of you someplace before.
Uh-huh.
This is Mrs. Ford, of course.
Of course. You see, we've just been married. She's one of those new Fords.
You guys, that's great.
Hey, I'll be all right. Just let me take a nap. I feel good. I feel good. Go ahead.
I bet you're a great cook, Mrs. Ford.
Why, I never cooked a thing in my life.
Can you cook?
Can I cook?
Sometimes fitting in as white meant playing Indian.
And how?
Here. You? Have you seen a white man or a white girl about here?
Me no capiche.
I'll bet you understand money. How much for that blanket?
100.
I wouldn't give you $100 for 6 of them.
This blanket have he big history. One time him belonged to Big Chief Spoilershine.
Who?
Spoilershine. Spoilershine. My baby don't care. My baby don't care.
Why, confound you. I'll have you thrown off this reservation.
You like this doll?
Yeah. How much?
Him also have history. You know him name?
No. What is it?
Big Chief Rip Your Collar.
Who?
Rip your collar, rip your collar, rip your collar.
Why, you fresh Indian.
Oh.
How dare you?
Oh.
You know who I am?
Who?
I'm an Underwood.
Indian, no care for typewriter.
My daughter wants that blanket and doll. I'll give you $50 for the boat.
$50. Oh, we no can sell. Too cheap. No. Cost me more. No. You make them $75.
50. What does that mean?
Indian raspberry.
Come on, $50.
No. One price, 65.
50.
60.
50.
60.
40.
What become of 50?
$40.
$40 for blanket and doll.
$40 for the blanket and doll.
White man pay him $40 for 2 articles.
$40 for the both articles.
Look, if I sell you for $40, I couldn't make a cent. I should live, so it cost me alone $35.50. Could I sell you for $40?
$40.
Such a chutzpah, $40.
$40.
You that Shemin, I buy the house when it's up now. I give you for $40 2 articles like that.
$40.
Listen, I don't need your business. Will you do me a favor?
Yes.
Go some other place. Go ahead.
All right.
Look. You can't take a joke. Well, here you are, my man. Give me the $40. Come in again sometime. Come in again. Be glad to see you. There you are, my friend. Come in again sometime, my dear little fellow, because I do. Oh, la, yeah,
Come here, Hiawatha. And what are you doing in that fireman's shirt?
Me, Chief.
Fire chief?
Yes, here is my hook and ladder.
Getting kind of peppy, aren't you?
I feel pretty good, Miss Custer. I feel like Bodie-O. Oh, hotcha. You know, Miss Custer, they've got a lot of beautiful squaws around here.
Oh, yeah?
They've got the hottest looking squaws you ever saw. You know, I tried to get a room here, but it didn't have a room, so I made a reservation. Miss Custer, no, Miss Custer.
Not for you.
And often fitting in as white meant performing in blackface.
The Epsom did it. La-la-la-la, la-la-la-dee, la-la-la-la-la, la-la-la-dee, la-la-la-la-la, la-la-la-la-la. I'm making waffles.
Hey, Mr. Underwood, the sheriff is coming.
Sheriff Bob Wells is here.
Who did you say?
Sheriff Bob Wells.
Bob Will.
Listen, fellas, we packed them here. You know the fella I'm after. Look over the ranch. Watch the road. And don't let a white man get by you. You get me? Don't let a white man get by you.
Sally Morgan.
How dare you speak to me?
Don't you know me? Henry?
Henry Williams?
Well, of course. Well, who am I? Amos and Andy?
Why, your disguise is perfect. How did you ever think of it?
You mean the black?
Yes.
I didn't. I got in the stove and somebody else thought of it. Sally Morgan? You've been crying. Now, what's the trouble?
I wish I were dead.
Don't say that.
I wish I'd never been born.
You could have said that first and saved yourself a wish. You know that, don't you?
Henry, if you loved a person and they were of Indian blood,
I can't stand the sight of any blood. We've no time to fool around. The sheriff is here.
and he's come to hang you,
Well, let's not hang around here.
Here. Who are you?
the waitress,
Who are you?
The cook,
Where's my breakfast?
your breakfast. Huh? I didn't eat myself yet. His breakfast. Come on, Sally.
Andy, what kind of a cookie you got? Oh, Dad, I found the band of slip. What are you doing here? Whose flivver is this?
I don't know.
What's the matter with you? Are you crazy?
No.
Just as a precaution, I think I'd better have the sheriff arrest you, don't you?
Yes.
Tally, get into the flivver. I'll be with you in a minute, and don't move until I get back.
There must have been a dozen bandits. Everyone looked like a killer to me.
Don't worry, Mr. Underwood. Sheriff Bobwells always gets his man. Hey, you. Come here. Where you from?
We moved.
Yeah? What's your name?
Rudy Valley.
Who is this fella?
He works for me. He's a cook.
Yes, sir, but I's a singing cook.
Yeah? Well, I got an idea. Maybe you ain't no cook at all. Maybe you don't sing either. Go on. Let's hear you. Now.
I'm so happy since the day that I fell in love in a great big way. And the big surprise is someone loves me too. Yes, it's hard for you to see just what anyone could see in me, but it only goes to prove what love can do. My baby don't care for show. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby just cares for me. My baby don't care for furs and laces. My baby don't care for high-tone places. My baby don't care for free or other expensive things. She's sensible as can be. For me. My baby just cares for me. He don't care for Lawrence Tibbetts. He'd rather have me around to pivot. But Rogers is not her style, and even Chevalier's smile is something that she can see. I want
Hey, that was pretty good. Sing us another chorus of that.
Yeah, sing it another. You really want me to?
Yeah.
My baby don't care for show. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby just cares for me. What was that? Did you think there was a voice coming from the garage? Yeah. Why, that was me. Well, of course. I throw my voice in different directions. I'm a contortionist. Didn't you know it? Listen to this. How are you? All right. How do you feel? Pretty good. See you later. All right. Goodbye. Goodbye. Ha-ha. You. My baby don't care for show. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby just cares for me.
Oh, that bandit's flubbed me. The bandit's flivver's in the garage. They must be on this ranch.
Is there anyone missing on this place last night?
Only Mort and Andy. They went into town.
Take them into the kitchen and I'll question.
But none of these performances are exactly as they seem on the surface. Within a single scene, Cantor could manage at least 5 different identities, and often these shifts occurred so rapidly that audiences couldn't keep track of them all. More importantly, neither could the censorship review board. Eddie Cantor performed material that most other actors couldn't in the 1930s, and today I'd like to explore some of the many identities Cantor performed in service of producing or procuring a wider identity for himself. What I would like us all to keep in mind is that it is possible for Eddie Cantor to be a very, very funny man, especially for those of us who pick up on his coded Jewish humor, but also problematic. My goal is not to point fingers, but instead explore entertainers like Cantor through a lens of curiosity. Can we be curious about why blackface performance has historically been so popular amongst Jewish entertainers, and also why Eddie Cantor was able to perform certain racial and ethnic caricatures, as well as make overtly sexual references, even as such material began to fade from the screen as censors tightened around such representation? So first, some background on Eddie Cantor. Born Isidore Iskowitz on January 31st, 1892 on the Lower East Side, Eddie Cantor was raised by his maternal grandmother, Esther, from age 2 on, after both of his parents, both Russian Jewish immigrants, died. His poor upbringing would continue to surface in his comedic persona, always aware of class and framed from the perspective of the hardworking immigrant little guy aspiring to the American dream. He dropped out of school early in order to take on a bunch of odd jobs, one of which was in a vaudeville show at the Old Clinton Theater. He was quickly picked up by Gus Edwards and played in his kid cabaret. From then on, he would make a living in the performing arts. His big break came in 1917 when Florenz Ziegfeld hired Cantor for his midnight review, The Frolics. Despite some turbulence between Ziegfeld and Cantor in the early 1920s, the two reconciled and Cantor returned to Ziegfeld's stage to do a series of successful shows, including Cantor's first full-length part on Broadway in Kid Boots in 1923. He remained a headliner for the remainder of the decade, becoming one of the highest-paid theater performers of his time. His success in Ziegfeld's Follies in 1927 and then in Whoopee the following year led to his Hollywood success. In addition to his triumph on stage and screen, Cantor had a successful career in radio and publishing. A few things were consistent across these four mediums. When the stock market crashed in 1929, much of Cantor's comedy revolved around the satirizing of the economic and political crisis of the early Depression, including, but not limited to, a prevalent anxiety amongst white males. The film medium, however, allowed him to address this anxiety in ways that other outlets did not. Cantor combined what many would perceive as an effeminate, sexually liminal persona, along with burnt cork, in foreign yet fantastical settings to construct a new form of whiteness while establishing a clear divide between white Americans and non-white others. Margaret McFadden captures Cantor's approach nicely when she sums it up in the following way. Cantor's film characters condense the intersecting crises of the economy, of gender roles and relations, and of ethnic and racial identity into whimsical plots, but then invariably resolve all the narrative conflicts in ways that reestablish economic fairness, restore normative gender roles and relations, and construct a more inclusive version of white ethnicity, one with clear boundaries between white and non-white Americans. We see this formula play out in the screen adaptation of Palmy Days, Whoopee, The Kid from Spain, and Roman Scandals, 4 films I will be showing several clips from today. For Americans living through the Great Depression, the economic crisis and the gender crisis were related. Men were laid off and women were thrust into the workforce. As a result, women's social and economic power swelled, but they were still expected to fulfill the same sexual and marital expectations. According to McFadden, films made during this era relied on female characters to raise and symbolically allay the threat of women's growing social and economic power by diffusing male fears of female sexual and economic independence. Cantor plays off this reality in all of the films he made between 1930 and 1933. Through a series of disguises, Cantor reinvents the heterosexual white working class male as fluid in his relationships with women, yet still economically competent and successful romantically.
It was fatal. And by the way, I'm insane. Boogie, 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 boogie.
Oh, you're just the man. Oh, my, look, if I've been wanting to work on a thing like you.
A thing like me?
Yes, a thing like you. Come in here. I'll build you up.
I don't want to be built up.
I'll build you up, and how I'll build you up. Here, now take this medicine ball. This will do you good.
Oh, you can't swallow a thing like that? Oh, throw it. To you?
Come on. Attaboy. Why, you're better than I thought you were.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, boy, this will build you up. Now, come on. Up. That's a boy.
Yeah?
Now, isn't that nice?
Yes, but what part of me will it build up?
Well, your back, your shoulders, and your back.
Yeah?
Want it stronger?
Well, I don't know. Wait a minute.
There.
That's no good.
Oh, isn't that
That's no
romantic?
good.
I can see us together in the moonlight riding way off
Take
into
me
the
off.
desert. Your horse
Take
going
me off.
faster and faster and faster and
Take me
faster.
off. I don't like it.
Oh, that's
I
what
just-
I call love.
Take it off.
Oh, wait a minute. I smell something burning.
It's me. Take me off. I'll steal the horse. Take me off.
Wait a minute.
Will you stop it?
There.
Stop it. Oh, that's the worst thing I ever felt. It's broken bottles.
Oh.
It's pins in it. You stabbed me.
Oh, don't be
Oh, what did you
afraid.
do? Oh, wait a minute. I think I'm going to keel over.
Oh, you
Oh.
poor boy. Oh,
Oh.
no circulation. A good massage is what you need. That's
Well, what are you
all
gonna do now?
I'm going to give you a good massage.
I don't want to.
You don't realize how happy I am to be able
Yeah,
to do
but you don't
something
know-
for you that's
No.
going to do you so much
Well,
good.
how about me? Why didn't
Oh,
you ask me?
dear boy. Why, darling, you've got two left legs.
I was all together before I got on that horse.
Well, don't worry. I'll make it right.
Oh, what are you doing? You crippled. What are you doing?
Do you think, sweetheart, that you could ever learn to love me?
I'm dying and she asks me riddles.
Now, this may seem unnecessary, dear, but it's very, very necessary.
Necessary for whom?
For you, dear. This will make you robust.
Did you say robust or robo?
It's as good for your diaphragm.
Nothing wrong with my frying pan.
Now I've got to unravel you.
Oh.
Oh, at last I meet the man of my dreams, face to face. Oh, how often. Do you feel better, darling?
Yeah, pretty soon I won't feel anything at all.
Oh, do you think you could marry me now?
Yeah, just keep on hitting me till I'm in the mood.
Oh, if you only knew what I feel for you.
What do you mean?
There isn't any sacrifice I would make for you. I'd give you everything. Oh, come back here. I haven't finished with you yet.
Oh,
I love you so.
come on. Broken bottles. Oh.
But Cantor's humor also serves another function. Cantor's accentuation of his own Jewish identity, performed through a repertory of tropes and framing mechanisms, represents the comedian's ambivalent ties to ethnicity, specifically as it relates to masculinity and whiteness. We see an overt display of this layering in the auction block scene you watched from Roman Scandals. As a whole, this film insinuates a history of Jewish enslavement by the Romans, which is accentuated in moments where Cantor plays up his Eastern European roots. His Russian skins, the pipics, and even his name, Oedipus, which is likely a play on Eddie Putz, Yiddish for fool or penis, showcase his ethnic roots to culturally informed audiences. At the same time, he plays up his more effeminate side, which on the surface speaks to the nationwide gender crisis. However, this gender fluidness, read as a mechanism for diffusing white male fears of women's sexual and economic independence amidst the Great Depression, serves to mask Cantor's own ambivalence around ethnic difference. That is, Cantor uses what Sander Gilman has asserted as the most pervasive symbol of Jewish difference, the feminized male Jew, to in fact alleviate the fears of a more widespread economic crisis. The coding that Cantor performs in this scene, especially his references to African-American culture, and let me actually just go back and show you since it's
I can dance. Jump down, jump down, jump down, jump down.
So this is a reference to Bill Robinson, the famous tap dancer you might recognize from Shirley Temple films. He was known for rolling his eyes in that particular manner. And then here.
Dinah, is there anyone finer?
What do I want to hear?
Just heard me say Dinah.
Dinah is a reference to the song made famous originally by Ethel Waters and then by future African-American groups. So these references help to bury his Jewishness by veiling his slave performance in allusions to Black culture, thus revealing the ways in which Cantor is white rather than another other. Cantor's gamut of transformations throughout all of the films I'm discussing today do this work and speak to the number of layers involved in his double-coded performances of race. Cantor notoriously appeared as a range of characters within a single film, but the roles he took on always served a narrative function. Because he constructed scenarios where he was usually on the run, the plots of these films often necessitated a disguise. While not always an ethnic or racial other, the practicality and accidental nature of Cantor's concealments allow him to become ethnically and racially other in a fashion that is permissible within the parameters of early production code. Furthermore, because his character morphs so frequently within a single film, an audience is forced to reconcile more offensive mutations, for one example being blackface, as par for the course.
There you are. I tell you later.
No, you tell me now. If you had done like I told you, there'd be no Don Sebastian.
I know. I'll get him now. No, first you listen to me. Sit down. Huh? You heard me, Pedro. Sit down. First,
You get Ricardo for me. First, I get Sebastian for me. Mean when you say that to me? I am your leader. How you like that? How you like if I tell Anita's father that you have a kidnap his wife, huh? Perhaps, Pedro, this will remind you who is boss. What you give it to Pedro, Pedro give back to you. Pedro, under the table, my gun, right at your stomach. And under the table, Pancho, my gun, he looks at you too. One move, and you are no more. This is your end. I kill you like that. You shoot me, Jose and the man will get you. Then Ricardo, he will get Anita. We mustn't forget that we are friends. We will put away the guns. Sure, no use for us to fight. I will take care of you, and man, take care of Ricardo for me. First, I kill Don Sebastian. No, first, we drink to the death of Don Sebastian. What were you doing under that table?
Oh, nothing, sir. I'm just a table looker under.
What is your business here?
Oh, excuse me. Here's my axe.
Once again, on the run, Cantor as Eddie, pretending to be the famous Spanish bullfighter Don Sebastian II, gets himself into a bit of trouble. He hides under a table in a Mexican nightclub to avoid getting caught by Pancho and Pedro, two enemies. When a wine cork from a nearby table flies under the table and hits Eddie on the tuchus, he realizes this could be the perfect disguise. He takes a lighter to the cork and tests the residue on the backside of his hand like lipstick. Seconds later, Eddie has painted on a full blackface disguise using a polished knife blade as a mirror, including white lips and darkened dorsals. Like the oven combustion you saw in Whoopi, the clip earlier, the disguise is what allows Cantor to become racially other in a fashion that is permissible within the parameters of early production code. His disguise also necessitates the even more offensive dialogue that continues. And I recognize here that I am talking a lot about Eddie Cantor's blackface and that many of you here today may have grown up watching blackface entertainment or perhaps even performing in it without ever being introduced to its history. This is part of what is so complicated about the use of blackface in the United States. Because it is so enmeshed in our entertainment history and has seen so many iterations, white people often only see the nostalgic side and don't really understand the history. So before I get any deeper into Eddie Cantor's use of it, I thought I would offer a condensed history from where it stems and how it fits into the Jewish assimilation story. Both minstrelsy and the darkening of one's skin date back to the Middle Ages. Some of the earliest uses of blackface can be seen in medieval miracle plays where the souls of the damned were represented by actors painted black or in black costumes. During the Elizabethan era, actors commonly used makeup to darken their skin when seeking to represent Moors, Africans, and Turks. Shakespeare's Othello notoriously exemplifies a role which was written for a white actor to perform in blackface, whether it was called blackface in 1604 or not. But blackface minstrelsy specifically references a practice which began in the early 19th century. This particular type of 19th century blackface minstrelsy is the imitation of a Negro type. This type was both ascribed and prescribed to any visibly Black American during the antebellum period. The Negro type included a look, a way of speaking, and a specific way of being in the world. Early examples of this type can be seen in Charles Matthews' A Trip to America from 1824, where he imitated Black Americans' way of speaking and darkened his skin. Thomas Daddy Rice began jumping Jim Crow around 1830, which was a performance in which he blacked up and adopted a similar Black dialect. Both Matthews and Rice claimed that their impressions were based on empirical data. Matthews professed to have studied their broken English carefully, and specifically that of a real-life specimen in the form of a Black Methodist. T.D. Rice asserted that his Jim Crow character was based on a deformed enslaved person with a laughable limp. But no evidence outside of Matthews or Rice's personal writing exists for either of these ethnographic claims. Rice and his contemporaries quickly began building on these so-called types, developing a set of Negro archetypes, including the three most popular, Jim Crow, Zip Coon, and Longtail Blue. And here, the one in color, Jim Crow is the simpleton or the dumb fool. So you'll see his costume is really tattered and torn, and he speaks in a very broken English. Longtail Blue in the center dresses in a very dignified way. He's known kind of as the dandy. And when he opens his mouth, he speaks very, very eloquently. And then the Zip Coon character was introduced last, really as kind of like comedic relief, because there was a fear that if you introduced Longtail Blue as the dandy, that people would think that this is the way that Black people really are. So they had this, what becomes a more dangerous figure enter, the Zip Coon character, who looks like Longtail Blue, but as soon as he opens his mouth, he speaks in a very broken English. And so that kind of ups the comedy level, because it's supposed to be a joke that no Black person could possibly speak as eloquently as Longtail Blue. So it's a trick on the audience. So Zip Coon kind of is the ambivalent character that straddles both of these worlds. What each of these three archetypes and all those that would follow shared were their ascribed and prescribed ways of looking, speaking, and being in the world. Those who performed these types took on authoritative roles. They sold these fictitious representations as exact replicas of real specimens, while also assuring audiences that the attributes which they assigned to these types were natural. And although white men created these archetypes, Black performers have also participated in this practice since 1822. One of the more famous is Billy Kersands, who is there over on the side. With the influx of Irish immigrants in the 1840s and then 1860s, followed by Eastern European Jewish immigrants in the 1880s, we see a rise in the number of Irish and Jewish blackface performers. For one thing, entertainment was a real option for immigrants needing an accessible and reliable source of income. Even as the popularity of minstrel shows faded, many of these white immigrants moved into vaudeville, America's next major popular entertainment form. A carryover from the minstrel stage, the use of blackface remained popular on stage for the duration of vaudeville's lifespan. As you can imagine, because this was one of America's earliest and most popular forms of entertainment, it made a large impact on many people. Imagine growing up white and going to minstrel shows with your friends, siblings, parents. Blackface became a favorite pastime for lots of people, which is part of why it thrived for as long as it did. Although there exist many theories on blackface performance, for today's talk, I'd like to focus on why it is that so many Jewish entertainers utilize this particular mask. For performers like Al Jolson and Eddie Cantor, who continuously tried on Blackness as a costume on screen, we must accept that their success was indelibly tied to their masquerade and supported the ongoing fetishization of Black culture. When non-Black performers utilize this mask, their association with Blackness is only temporary and can be abandoned at any time. But it is the impermanence of this mask which has allowed various ethnic groups to assimilate into the American mainstream, which is to say Al Jolson and Eddie Cantor reinforce their whiteness through their temporary identification with Blackness, which seemingly downplays their Jewishness in the process. Such racial cross-dressing, and that's a term created by Michael Rogan, as he describes it, helped white immigrants, so Irish, Jewish, German, anybody who is visibly white, look whiter. So the very act of blacking up, in fact, washed away one's distinguishing ethnic features. So while it may be hard to acknowledge that these great Jewish performers profited off of racist caricature, we must also see this as part of their assimilation story. In fact, this is exactly what Al Jolson is trying to tell us in The Jazz Singer.
They call the frivolous a peculiar sort of organ with a heart mouth.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the jazz singer, this is made in 1927. It was technically the first soundy, so the dialogue is all still super titles, but then all of the songs were the first one to be synchronized sound. So it made a huge impact on lots of people.
He was all clearly dead. A wild sort of devil, dead on the level, was more than that. What they shuffle along, they shuffle along. So take your back down.
I'm just gonna fast forward some of this. So Al Jolson runs away. And then many years later,
Mammy, Mammy, the sunshine deep, the sunshine wet, but I know where the sunshine's best. Mammy, Mammy, my heartstrings are tangled around. Alabama, I'm a coming. Sorry, I made you wait. I'm coming. I hope and trust I'm not late. Mammy, Mammy, I'd walk a million miles of one of your smiles on my mammy. Oh, Mammy, my little Mammy. The sun shines east, the sun shines west, but I know where the sun shines best. It's on my Mammy I'm talking about. Nobody else's. My little Mammy. My heartstrings are tangled around Alabama. Mammy, I'm coming. I hope I didn't make you wait. Mammy, I'm coming. Oh, God, I hope I'm not late. Mammy, don't you know me? It's a little baby. I'd walk a million miles for one of your smiles on my me.
So Al Jolson chooses both. Michael Rogan speculates that Jewish immigrants might have used the blackface mask in order to take the focus away from their ethnic differences and instead shine a light on their perceptible whiteness. Rogan's theory of racial cross-dressing is directly applicable to Jolson's performance in The Jazz Singer, which substantiates this theory through its assimilation narrative and also through its lead actor. Both Jackie Rabinowitz, the film's protagonist, and Jolson in his life story and also more specifically in his performance as Rabinowitz, support how the blackface mask transitions various white ethnic groups into the American mainstream melting pot, while defining a larger concept of white national identity and outlining the parameters of citizenship. Thus, the mask which serves to protect one person, Al Jolson, or group of people may at the same time work to undermine another or destabilize the identity of a group. What is particularly interesting about these assimilatory performances on film is how the lead actor places particular emphasis on the act of becoming Black. In Jolson and Cantor films, audiences will almost always be privy to white performers donning and often doffing their blackface masks. These are called primal scenes, which expose the illusion that the individual was in charge of his or her voice, that it issued from an authentic interior. So here's just a couple examples. One first from The Jazz Singer. So in every 1930s film made by Eddie Cantor or Al Jolson, we'll always see one of them applying the blackface mask before the performance.
Mr. Wilson. Okay, you better get my mommy ready. This is tough to put on and take off. You know you're lucky.
In both of these clips, the audience is privy to the disguise itself. This ensures that we know neither Jolson nor Cantor is actually Black, just pretending. These primal scenes become increasingly more creative as film censors tightened around issues of racial and ethnic representation. Cantor became a master at incorporating his blackface into his gag. A perfect example of this can be seen in the clip from Whoopi you watched, where we are both privy to his act of applying blackface and witness the accident of it all. When Cantor climbs in the stove after preparing waffles and the whole stove combusts, he emerges in full blackface. The irony, of course, being that somehow the smoke and ashes have only covered his face and the front sides of his hands, leaving his clothing untarnished. Not to mention that white minstrel lips have appeared on his coal black face in the process. Here, the gag relieves Cantor of culpability and allowed such a scene to make it past the censorship review board. It also reaffirms his whiteness and helps to qualify the white heterosexual male underneath the mask of all of his disguises. Cantor diminishes his own ethnic otherness off the screen through his on-screen racial masquerade in blackface. But to really understand the use of racial and ethnic caricature in Cantor's own assimilation story, we have to look not only at his blackface, but at the moments where multiple forms of racial and ethnic caricature operate alongside one another. Cantor frequently double-coded his performances as a means of de-emphasizing his otherness. While Jewishness was always a part of his shtick, his use of blackface often helped to underplay his ethnic differences. In addition to blackface, Cantor utilized redface and brownface as well.
Why you come here?
Listen, I'll tell you, it's a long story.
First, you listen me. You want be friend with Indian?
I'm friendly with everybody. I even like my broker.
Oh. Sit down. Smoke pipe peace. Smoke.
No, me want hot chocolate. Oh.
No can have. Smoke.
Wait, give me a chance. I'll tell you. Old bicycle tires.
Let him see. You ever see me before?
Bless my soul, if it isn't Old Black Eagle.
Oh.
Old Black Eagle, that old man seagull.
Oh. Oh.
Oh,
Oh. Oh.
oh,
Oh.
it's an epidemic.
Pipe. You know what it mean when we smoke pipe?
Uh-huh.
Many years ago, white man, Indian, fight. After fight, sit down, smoke, fight, peace together.
Yeah, then white man fall asleep, Indian take axe, give white man haircut. I know that stuff. Go ahead, take it. I don't want it.
Smoke. You tell truth, we friend. You lie, enemies. Red man never lie.
No? Well, then just for my own information, listen.
Oh.
Was there anything between Pocahontas and John Smith? Oh, Chiefy.
Pocahontas, good, beautiful girl.
Yes.
John Smith, big, handsome man,
Don't tell me the rest. I read the True Story magazine.
Pocahontas saved John Smith.
Yeah, why didn't she do something for his brother Al?
His brother Al.
Yes, and I don't mean Jolson. Mammy.
Smoke. This make us friends.
Yeah, this make me sick. Pardon me, is that a wind-blown bob you have? Say, look, since you got your hair cut, how do you keep your wig warm? See, you're still doing that. If you took that bicarbonate of soda when I told you, you'd have been all right now. Oh, I'm afraid I'll have to leave the room.
No,
Oh,
stay.
Chief, please, where's your wigwam? Oh, we're going to have something to eat, huh? Well, that's fine. See, I'm satisfied.
When Cantor, as Henry Williams, arrives on the reservation, he's determined to make friends with Chief Black Eagle. Part of Cantor's comedic formula was to form some sort of partnership with characters of different races and ethnicities in order to satirize racial and ethnic prejudice. However, this often resulted in constructing his whiteness as distinct from an essentialized notion of Blackness or American Indianness. In this scene, Cantor breaks the ice between himself and the three natives with a series of jokes. The chief laughs. "You want be friend with Indian? I'm friend with everybody," replies Cantor, "even my broker." Cantor's quick retort gets at the heart of his Depression-era humor. He both befriends the other, possibly aided by his passing reference to Jewish stereotypes around Jews and money, while also critiquing the economy. Many Jewish scholars have written about the Wild West as a vaudeville stage, a performative space open to Jewish appropriation as a vehicle for inclusion. It is through the Western mythos and through redface that Jewish performers often Americanize themselves. Like so many forms of caricature, the Jewish identity is established through the simultaneous identifying with and distancing from another oppressed group. Both redface and blackface ultimately help to mark the Jewish performer's otherness as illusory, easily taken off as a costume or mask. But the key difference between someone Jewish like Cantor was that he was transforming racial difference, that is the difference between black and white, into ethnic difference, thereby staking a claim on his ability to assimilate and thus acquire a true American identity. Even when Cantor is not playing up his Jewishness, as he does in the redface scenes, his performance marks a type of imperfect assimilation. demonstrating his otherness in relation to a constructed hegemonic whiteness. His ability to live on the fringe in this sense helps him form alliances with other racial and ethnic groups, only to ultimately encourage a certain kind of exceptionalism by denying that identification and claiming a higher social status for the Jew as the white person underneath the mask. Part of what makes Eddie Cantor so interesting and complex is precisely his ability to construct his whiteness as distinct from Blackness or American Indianness, in other words, make himself more white and less ethnic, and simultaneously play to his own neuroses around money and his masculinity, two threads we see often with Jewish performers. Just think about Mel Brooks, for example. The way he engages with Jewish stereotypes around money is also truly double-coded. For the Gentile, his jokes were often read as Depression-era humor. For example, reading his gender fluidness as a mechanism for diffusing white male fears of women's sexual and economic independence. To Cantor's Jewish mishpacha, the gender fluid humor gets at something much deeper. The theory of the feminized male Jew goes back to racial theories of the 1890s and perhaps much earlier. Jews were thought to be more prone to insanity and to diseases, believed to derive either from Jews' biology or from their cultural experiences. Either way, Jews supposedly had a propensity to illness. Moreover, the Jewish male was looked on as less of a man and more like a woman. Circumcision in particular, which was imagined as a partial castration, was thought to feminize the Jewish male. These theories had a great impact on Freud's emerging psychoanalytic theories and comedians like Eddie Cantor. In all of Eddie Cantor's Depression-era films, he performs at least one routine in drag. This is one example from Palmy Days.
Well, I didn't know the.
Well, where's your locker?
I have nobody gave me.
Well, take number 7.
Well,
Hurry up.
well, look, you can't dress in there. It's too small.
Come out of there. Put your clothes in there.
Well,
That's what you have to
I'd
do.
rather you wouldn't.
Well, here, there's a good start for you. Now hurry up.
Too much.
What is the matter with you anyway?
Why,
Is there something that I can get for you?
No.
Do you want to go anywhere?
No.
Have you got everything? Have
Oh.
you got everything you want?
Oh, more than what I want.
Well, get yourself a towel. will
You mean to wrap a
Yes, to wrap around the. Are you ready, Kermit? Of all the crumbs.
There are no more showers. No more showers.
Give me that towel.
No.
Give me that towel.
What am I doing?
Don't be
Give me a towel for the love of the Lord and all. Give me a Turkish towel, please.
What do you want a turkey towel for?
You'll never know.
Go on and take your shower.
Oh, if I don't get a towel, I'll be the funniest guy in our predicament.
What's the matter with you?
No, you won't. I'd rather burn. I like it.
Crazy. Here's your towel.
Oh, that's too small. Give me a large Turkish towel.
You don't need any. From here, you're going right into the plunge.
Oh.
What's the matter with you?
Nothing. I feel fine. I'm going to be here for life. Have all my mail sent in here. Oh, Mama, look at your girl. Oh.
For the sake of time, I'm going to end that one there. Cantor's troubled gender performance was a revival of the pansy craze of the 1910s and 1920s, which took on new meaning in the crisis of masculinity, which occurred during the Great Depression. Speaking to the fear of emasculation, as well as a more widespread concern that women were becoming too powerful in the workforce and colleges, Cantor's role sought to turn this dynamic on its head. Here, his performance of effeminacy marks a type of imperfect assimilation, making it easier to ally himself with others. As if I haven't layered Cantor's performance enough, though, I want to add one final component to his imperfect assimilation story that builds on this gender crisis I've been discussing, but also offers a perfect example of why it is that Cantor's films thrived during the Depression era while money was so tight and the Censorship Review Board was really beginning to crack down on sexual innuendos and imagery.
Sylvia?
Oh, this mud is absolutely wonderful. This little girl right here. Why, she's only had 2 treatments, and already you wouldn't recognize her. A man in here? I must find him. It's all finished. Now keep perfectly quiet. Who are you?
You don't know who I am?
No.
Oh, am I glad to meet you.
Aren't you the Ethiopian beauty specialist?
Specialist. You sure guessed it. That's what I is. Yeah. And the Emperor sent me down here to kind of look after the princess, Sylvia.
I see. Slave, I'll have you taken to her. Show the doctor to the Princess Sylvia's compartment.
Thank you, man.
Right there we see
Eyes deep.
kind of the blackening of his skin as the disguise, right? It's worked in so the Censorship Review Board can pass it, right? So it's you're privy to the act of him blacking up. And then we see this becomes with the Goldwyn girls a dance between the white enslaved and the black enslaved. And there's all kinds of very kind of like sexual innuendos that happen throughout this. And I'm just going to fast forward to the end scene. So black and white dancers are going to perform on the same stage at this moment in time. So this is why we're seeing the flowing back and forth.
Beautiful. If you want to be loud.
Oh, death, where is thy sting? I don't care, 'cause I've seen everything. Keep young and beautiful.
So in that scene, we get to see kind of the removal of the blackface. We also, he ends very diminutive in size, right, which plays with gender roles and relationships. And then, of course, there's the play between the black and white dancers and all of the sexual innuendos that end up entering through that number. So in this final dance sequence from Roman Scandals, What a Perfect Combination, not only does it underpin race as fixed, but it reasserts a more normative relationship between the sexes. The second stanza of the song reads, "She has charms and perfect taste. I have arms that fit her waist. What a perfect combination. No wonder we're in love." So even if he's demonstrating a certain effeminate persona, he is still restoring that gender relationship or normative gender relationship through the lyrics. While cloaked in blackface, Cantor shows that although gender might be supple and ethnicity fluid, race and the relationship between the sexes is still fixed. That is, while some might read his effeminate performances as queer, his fluid shifts between two normative gender identities are, more exactly, aimed at normalizing the country's temporary rupture in the hegemonic order. Cantor's troubled gender performance also doubles representation, allowing him more ease to pursue his various masquerades. Film scholar Mary Ann Doan has argued that sexual mobility is a distinguishing feature of femininity. That is, while the male is locked into sexual identity, the female can at least pretend that she is other. The ways in which Cantor unfixes his sexual identity in all of these films allows him greater leverage in identity swapping. Furthermore, the coupling of Cantor's racial masquerade alongside his sexual desire might complicate the film's more overt racial masquerades, a false promise of the visible as an epistemological guarantee. Which is to say, the most visible elements of these dances merely obscure the truth in order to justify their own means of representation. So I've only shown a few examples of this today, but Eddie Cantor's racial masquerades in the 1930s were always coupled with a Busby Berkeley song and dance that tells some story of normative gender roles and female comportment. The last one you saw was one example. His otherwise effeminate persona gets flipped on its head when donning the blackface mask, while his blackness becomes further obscured by overt female sexuality in the form of risque tap dancing and optical reverie. By offering a critique of female behavior and how this normative female behavior lends itself to the promise of healthy heterosexual relationships, Keep Young and Beautiful helps disguise Cantor's otherwise blatant appraisal of race and helps to restore the disruption in America's perceived ideological and social order. But why is this pairing of Cantor's blackface and blatant female sexuality important? The escapism, grounded in female sexuality and fashion, which Busby Berkeley created through his optical distractions vis-a-vis the Goldwyn Girls, blinded viewers from seeing the encoded messages these women offered through their dancing. Their geometrically transfixing choreography, combined with Eddie Cantor's quick-witted humor, physical comedy, and song, helped to mask the threats of economic chaos, gender instability, and upward mobility for Black people in the United States at this time. And as much as the Censorship Review Board worked to censor films in the 1930s, Eddie Cantor found that the best way to get around these censors was to overload his films with a perfect combination of tantalizing Goldwyn Girls, blackface, redface, brownface, fast quips, and his gender-fluid performances. In this clip I have playing here in the background, the Goldwyn Girls have their cleavage completely exposed, and you won't see this, but the very end of the clip is just a top shot right down their breasts, which would have never gotten past censors in any other film. So they had their cleavage completely exposed as well as a portion of their midriffs. Generally, such costuming had not made it past the censors, but when combined with Cantor's blatant blackface and the more covert brown face used in this number, each element seems to have distracted from the other, allowing them all to pass the censors. In the process, Cantor used these various masquerades to bolster his own whiteness, transitioning himself from the Jewish vaudeville performer in the 1920s to the more assimilated white film star in the 1930s. This process is even more layered than a process I have discussed today. For the full story, you'll have to read my book, but hopefully I have shed some light on just how complex Eddie Cantor's and Al Jolson's use of racial masquerade really is. As I suggested at the beginning of this talk, it is possible for Eddie Cantor to be very, very funny to some, especially us Jews, and at the same time present harmful caricatures of others. It is also possible to recognize our common human desire for belonging and use these race performances as models for understanding how complex and how challenging Jewish assimilation was for first-generation Jewish immigrants, while also vowing not to repeat these patterns moving forward. So one final clip.
No, Miss Custer, listen. Why don't you bury the hatchet?
That's what I'm trying to do.
No, will you wait a while? Will you wait a while? Stop this nonsense. I want to be serious. Miss Custer, you know, there comes a time in every man's life when he feels the need of a companion, someone to whom he can give his affection, someone who will understand him, love him, comfort him. Miss Custer, Mary, I'd like to ask you one question.
Yes, Henry, dear.
Whatever became of that calf? No, will you wait a while? Will you listen? Will you wait a while? You know how I feel about you. My baby don't care for show. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby just cares for me. My baby just loves no consultation and how she enjoys my operation. After our honeymoon in April, May, or June, I'll get my nursing free. My baby just cares for me. That's all there is.
Now we're going to open it up for questions and answers.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, if you have comments or questions, raise your hand. There is a mic over here if you want to stand up and come up to the mic, but I'll try to catch you with this one floating. Any comments or questions for Bryn? Yes. Here, hold on.
In the in the jazz singer, it's obvious that they have sound because they can sing. Why can't they speak?
So they could, sound technology was brand new at this point. Really the first, so this was 1927. In 1926, they really had only introduced sound synchronization. It was still incredibly expensive and not perfected. So they were trying to minimize how much they had to do. So they thought they could get people into the theater if they had Al Jolson singing. So they first kind of prioritized synchronizing the songs, the music, and not the dialogue, and kind of slowly transitioned people as it got cheaper and they knew it was going to be effective.
So I have a question. You referred to these performance codes. What were the actual codes and when did that change and why did it change? Because, you know, this is rather offensive now today, but I don't understand, you know, where the codes fit in. What were they? How did they change? Why did it change? Did something happen and when? So
the first kind of very loose code was called the Don't Be's and Be Carefuls. And these were introduced in 1927. And they were pretty loosey-goosey and nobody followed them. Then in 1930, they started cracking down and created a more formalized code. At this point, you have to understand that a large part of their support was coming from the Catholic Church. And so they kind of prioritized what the Catholic Church thought was good. So anti-Semitic material actually slipped past the censors quite a bit. But sexual innuendos and things like that, they really cracked down on that. So from anything really made pre-1930, we refer to as pre-code, if you've heard of that terminology. So that's pre-code. From 1930 to 1934, they were still trying to figure out what that even meant, what the code meant. And they were written down. They were, you know, they had to go through a review board, but there was really this period of transition for those 4 years where a lot could get past the censors. And a lot of these early Eddie Cantor films were kind of made in those early years when they were still trying to figure it out. There is one law or rule that says like no material that is offensive to any race, nation, or creed should appear. And that's kind of like you're looking at all these things and they seem to slip past. As somebody new took over, Joseph Breen took over, they started really cracking down more. So in 1934, I would say by 1937, things were pretty hard to get past the censors, but people like Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson, because they had a whole history of performing in blackface, people knew them as these blackface performers. And oddly enough, they were able to continue performing in blackface because it wasn't seen so much as racist as it was as just part of their persona. So we see a lot of the older blackface performers still kind of sneak in later on. But the code was really in place until the 1963. It started to decline massively in 1954, which is when Joseph Breen stepped down. But I'd say the most heightened part of the code, the most enforced period, was really 1934 to 1954 during his tenure as production code manager.
But then, I mean, we don't see blackface today.
Usually not. I mean, we do, but not on film, usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you speak to maybe what else was happening culturally? I mean, the civil rights movement came on, et cetera, et cetera. How did that all weave into, changes in what was portrayed on screen?
Everything was very sneaky. The NAACP had a very strong voice, but didn't create a lot of change. Their voice wasn't, it was kind of ignored. So like there were constant, appeals to a lot of the imagery that we saw, like people, it's not that people weren't fighting it. It's that, they just weren't being kind of taken very seriously. With World War II and Nazis and Nazism and everything, they got much more careful about anti-Semitic material. So like kind of in that post-World War II era, we do see a big removal of that kind of like racist imagery. But racist imagery as it regards American Indians and also American Indians really didn't have anybody standing up for them. They didn't have a kind of like group voice. And so we see a lot of that material for the longest period of time because nobody was fighting back. Whereas we see the removal of racist Black imagery a lot sooner than that. But I mean, arguably it still exists. So it's just transformed. And I'd say some of it is as malicious as it was. It just looks different and we're not totally aware of what that is.
Any other comments, questions? Yeah.
I assume the jazz singer was was a commercial success, the original one.
Yes, and this is the original one that you saw.
Yeah,
It was
no,
huge
I know
commercial, huge commercial.
So was there a backlash of anti-Semitism? Because this is a very Jewish movie with a lot of Jewish culture significance. Well, was there an anti-Semitism? Did people rise up like we saw in North Carolina? We will not replace us.
Well, I will say that a lot of these films were not shown in the Deep South. So in many ways, like the film industry anticipated certain backlash of certain Black there were lots of films that weren't shown because of, Black representation and lots of films that weren't shown because of Jewish representation. And so this was a film that wasn't necessarily shown as much in the Deep South. Yeah.
Okay. Just as a side note, the Jazz Singer opened at the Tower Theater, downtown Los Angeles on Broadway, about 5th Street. And at the time, the movie screens were flush with the back wall, and there was no place for speakers. So they had to cut holes in the back wall of the theater facing an alley, and they hung the speakers outside. And if you go downtown today, you can see the Tower Theater. And if you go around to the back of the theater, you can see the holes in the wall where the speakers were.
It's a great piece of history. Thank you.
Ken?
Well, it's obvious that blackface is offensive today, but do we know what Black people thought of blackface, say in the 20s and 30s?
Yeah, most Black people thought it was pretty offensive, but that didn't mean that they weren't performing in it. And they weren't performing in it for the same reasons that white performers were performing in it. Some people didn't have a choice, like they wouldn't be allowed on film if they didn't perform in it. It was also like a viable option. It was a viable way of making money. And then there are those Black performers. And of course, I can't speak for all Black performers, but there were a large number of Black performers who found a way to really make it a commentary on power. So if they could make a particular amount of money, then that to them was seen as a power move, right? If they could make more money than a white contemporary, then that was seen as sort of a power move for them. somebody like Burt Williams, who was the first to really perform on Black Broadway, 1902, 1903. He was performing in blackface, and he was Caribbean American. And he thought it was a power move to perform as a Caribbean American in blackface because all of the newspapers wrote about him as an African American performer. And he thought it was pretty cool that he knew something that they didn't. And he was kind of thinking that they were the butt of the joke. So there were a lot of people who were performing for different reasons, but considered it like a marketing strategy or power move to do so, even if they found it offensive. And that doesn't mean that they weren't met with huge criticism from like the NAACP or the Black newspapers that were writing at the time.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, well, the folks on Zoom can't hear you. Here you go.
I'm just curious, what in the world fascinated you about such things as Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson? It's certainly not in your life experience.
That is true. I began my interest in this really, I've always been a tap dancer, and I grew up watching Shirley Temple films. And so it started in grad school. I started rewatching some of the Bill Robinson and Shirley Temple films. And it's very different watching those films as an adult than it is watching them as a child, because as a child, you see it for the kind of like the purest tap dancing that exists. And they became increasingly more problematic as I watched these films. And so then I decided to dig deeper. And what really interested me was kind of like, you see one thing, but there's something going on sonically that we're not necessarily aware of. And that for me was precisely that Bill Robinson was actually doing twice the work or 3 times the work that Shirley Temple was doing. And yet she was getting 2 or 3 times the credit that Bill Robinson was getting. And so that kind of took me on this journey to figure out what's going on the screen beyond what we see, like what's going on sonically, what's going on through our other senses. And what I found was so interesting is I think there's something that happened for people with the introduction of sound. So really with the jazz singer and the introduction of sound, people were not used to listening. They were used to hearing, but not on screen, and sound became novel for them. And so they were so taken by the novelty of sound that they weren't actually paying attention to song lyrics, to what was actually being said or heard or any of this. And so much got past them. And I think that's what was happening with the censorship review boards too, is they were so distracted by like this like sensory overload that people weren't used to, that they just didn't really think about what was being projected. Yeah.
Comments, questions? So I heard an NPR discussion last week or two about a guy, Noble Jolson. Are you familiar with him? Oh, okay. I won't ask my question.
Okay, sorry.
Now, he was a Black performer who did blackface, and he played other characters. You know, he'd get pulled in to do, Caribbean characters, South American characters, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little different take on, whites doing blackface, but.
I mean, actually, like one thing I really explore in my book is the ways in which all of these different identities were conflated. So if you were like Catherine Dunham is a great example. She was a Black choreographer who's from the West Indies, but her company was always hired to perform anything that was like remotely ethnic. She was like the Black company. So anything that was remotely ethnic, her like, even like if it took place in Morocco, she'd have her, West African dancers perform the Moroccan scenes in films and things like that. So there's like a conflation of having to perform for multiple identities. Yeah.
Interesting. Other question?
I'm sorry, what?
Wasn't his name actually Asa Jolson?
So all of these performers had, yes, more ethnic sounding names that they then converted. Even like in the jazz singer, we see Jackie Rabinowitz, and then he becomes Jack Robin.
As a small aside, my mother, when she was about teen, dated one of Jolson's younger brothers. Fortunately, she didn't marry him, or I wouldn't be here today.
Okay, anything on Zoom? Any questions? Okay, great. Yes. So any last call?
Oh, I think there's.
Oh, Louise?
Perfect, thank you.
You have a Zoom comment? Here, hold on. Let me give it to you.
Hi, there is one question on Zoom. And she's just asking if you can, and says, I think Al Jolson had a TV show and had Black performers on who supported Black entertainers. Can you address that?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, these films are from the 1920s, 1930s, which doesn't mean as things changed in the United States. I mean, Eddie Cantor also kind of worked with Black performers later on. Sammy Davis Jr. is one of them. And so they both did end up working with Black performers, as they often did. You know, and for the most part, their racial masquerades ended in the mid to late 1950s. So a lot of that disappeared, right? And a lot of that coincides too, just what was going on with kind of segregation, Jim Crow laws, production code guidelines, right? A lot of it was kind of determined by the film studios too, right? So a lot of what they were doing or who they were performing with was determined by the film studios. It wasn't totally up to them, but they were still performing in blackface really through the 1950s. So yes, they did support Black artists as well. And if you ask them, they would say, no, they don't have any problem with Black performers and they're not racist and all of that. And that's not my business whether they are or aren't. I'm speaking specifically to kind of the race performances that they reinforced during their kind of, big moment of stardom.
Okay, well, Bryn, thank you so much. This is so fun, especially with all the clips.